Hello, and welcome to The Brief Insight, your go to podcast for breaking down the latest trends, research, and policies shaping our world. Whether you're passionate about sustainability, global economics, or emerging innovations, this is where we simplify complex ideas to keep you informed and inspired. If you enjoy what you hear, don't forget to like this episode, subscribe to our channel, and share it with anyone looking for insights that matter. We're here every Monday and Friday, so hit that notification bell to stay updated. Your support helps us grow and continue bringing you sharp, relevant content that sparks conversation. Thank you for tuning into The Brief Insight. Now let's dive into today's topic.
Okay, deep dive time. You sent us a fascinating stack of sources here, all circling around a really intriguing, slightly quirky question. Can fashion actually signal something important about the economy? Seriously, can the length of a skirt offer us a clue?
It sounds like something you'd dismiss offhand, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But our sources, well, they delve deep into this very idea, particularly the famous Hemline Index.
Right.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to unpack what these articles and research reveal, pulling out the most insightful nuggets to understand the history, the validity, and maybe the modern relevance of this connection.
Right, because it's not just about hemlines, is it? These sources also touch on other surprising fashion-related recession indicators that seem to pop up, especially online.
Exactly. The goal here is to give you that well-informed shortcut on these ideas, helping you see what the sources actually say about whether there's, well, any truth to them.
So let's start where the sources do, with the core concept. They introduce the hemline index. What's the fundamental idea it's proposing?
Okay, so the central theory our sources discuss is that women's skirt length mirror the prevailing economic conditions. It suggests there's a correlation there.
And the classic rule of thumb. What's the simple version?
Well, the theory posits that shorter hemlines tend to align with economic booms, periods of prosperity. And conversely, when the economy experiences a downturn, hemlines supposedly drop. They get longer.
So the saying is something like,
As one source puts it simply, the shorter the skirt, the stronger the economy.
it feels almost too simple though, right?
Mm-hmm.
But our sources trace this idea back quite a ways. Where did it actually originate?
Yeah, it's not some new internet thing. The idea is attributed to economist George Taylor, who proposed it based on his observations way back in 1926.
1926. Wow. So what historical evidence from the sources supports this theory? Do they give examples?
Oh, yeah. The sources highlight specific eras pretty clearly. If you look at the Roaring Twenties, for instance, they describe it as a period of significant economic boom. And what was the fashion silhouette emerging then?
Flapper dresses. Much shorter skirts than people were used to.
Precisely. Skirt lengths decreased throughout that decade, reaching the shortest point around 1926, often exposing the knee, which was, well, quite revolutionary then.
Scandalous even.
Right. The sources connect this scandalous fashion to the era's glitz, glamour, and women enjoying newfound independence, all against that strong economic backdrop.
Okay, so shorter skirts in a boom. Makes sense visually. Then comes the dramatic shift.
The 1929 stock market crash and the Great Depression that followed, the sources note a drastic change, almost overnight in mood.
And fashion reflected that shift.
Apparently so. Skirts returned to lower calf length, becoming much longer and more conservative. This lengthening is presented by the sources as signifying the economic insecurity, the mass unemployment, the uncertainty of the 1930s. It suggested women showed that collective economic fear through their fashion choices.
That's a powerful link, fashion, as a sort of barometer of collective feeling during a crisis. What about the 1940s? The Depression eased, but then World War II started.
Yeah, so skirts shortened slightly again from the 30s lows, becoming more practical, often knee-length. The sources connect this directly to women entering the workforce during the war, needing more functional clothing while men were away.
And the economy was starting to pick up a bit too.
It was slowly strengthening from the Depression, yeah. And hemlines reflected that kind of modest, practical shift.
And then the 1960s, another boom time, according to the sources.
Yes, the sources point to a significant economic boom in the 60s, decreased unemployment, rising wages, that sort of thing. And well, that's when the miniskirt became all the rage.
Showing more leg than ever before.
Yeah.
Which fits that vibrant, youthful economic energy at the time.
Exactly. Fun and youthful style, as one source puts it.
Okay, let's fast forward a bit. The 1990s, our sources mention the early 90s recession. What did fashion look like then, according to this theory?
The sources definitely reference economic stress in the early 90s. And if you think about famous styles from that era, maybe referencing examples from 90s rom-coms, like the sources suggest what popular skirt lengths come to mind.
Midi and maxi skirts felt very, very prevalent then. Longer lengths, definitely.
Right. Again, aligning with the period of economic stress. So, looking at this historical trajectory presented in the sources, the Hemline Index seems to have some compelling visual evidence behind it, doesn't it?
It does seem to follow a pattern, visually at least.
Hmm.
But our sources immediately raise the crucial question, is there actual truth to this? Is it validated by research or is it just, interesting coincidence?
And that's where it gets really debated. While it seems whimsical, maybe a bit silly, some studies have actually looked for a correlation. One source details a 2010 study by a Dutch economist, Marjolein van Baardewijk. She analyzed data from 1921 all the way to 2009.
Okay, nearly a century of data. What did she find?
She found a statistically significant relationship between skirt lengths and stock market movements.
Statistically significant? Wow. Okay, tell me more about her specific finding. What was the lag or lead?
Her research suggested that hemlines tended to rise approximately 3 years before an economic upturn, and they tended to fall approximately 3 years before a downturn.
3 years before.
Yes. So her finding hinted it might even have some kind of predictive power, which is, pretty wild.
Wow. Predicting the market by looking at skirts. That sounds incredible.
Yeah.
But also maybe a little too good to be true. Our sources also present significant counter-arguments and criticisms, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. They absolutely do. Other researchers strongly dispute these findings. They argue the relationship is much more likely correlational than causal.
Meaning?
Meaning, the key insight here is that fashion is influenced by just a huge number of other factors, massive social shifts, cultural movements, technological changes. They believe these play a much more significant role than just the economy in isolation.
So economic changes and fashion changes might just be happening at the same time because of other bigger societal forces pushing both.
Precisely. That's the classic causation versus correlation debate right at the heart of the critique presented in these sources.
Okay, and how does the Hemline Index hold up in the 21st century, according to the sources? Does this theory still apply today with everything moving so fast?
Well, the sources suggest that the classic hemline index is considered far less reliable now. Or perhaps it's simply evolved beyond recognition. It's harder to track.
Why is that the case now? What's changed so much?
The whole landscape of fashion is fundamentally different. Globalization means trends aren't just coming from Paris or New York anymore. Fast fashion has drastically sped up the trend cycle. It's relentless.
Right.
And social media has fragmented and diversified trends even further. You have so many micro trends happening all at once.
Things move so fast and in so many different directions simultaneously.
Exactly. Trends change incredibly rapidly, the sources note monthly, not even yearly in some cases. So trying to pinpoint a single dominant trend like spurt length across the whole market and correlate it with the entire economy becomes, well, incredibly difficult, maybe impossible.
Individual preferences and niche styles are just much more prominent now.
That's the argument, yeah. So the classic index struggles because fashion itself is just so complex and fragmented today.
Makes sense.
However, some proponents, according to the sources, suggest a kind of modified hemline index.
A modified version. Okay, interesting. What would that look at instead of just skirts?
Well, they suggest looking at other fashion-related trends that might be better indicators today. For instance, the popularity of luxury items. Think designer handbags or high-end sneakers.
Ah, okay. Why shift focus to those specific things?
The logic is about discretionary spending. As disposable incomes rise during booms, people are more likely to splurge on these expensive, non-essential items, right?
Right. You feel richer, you buy the fancy bag.
Exactly. And during downturns, those high-ticket purchases tend to be the first things people cut back on.
That tracks. Yeah. It's about where people feel comfortable putting their extra money, or if they even have extra money.
Right. The sources also mention fast fashion again here. Its rapid emergence and disappearance just makes establishing any consistent connection really challenging. And they point out the growing focus on sustainability, which influences choices for reasons often totally independent of the immediate economic climate.
Good point. Let's consolidate some of the other criticisms the sources mention. Beyond the changing fashion landscape, what are the main limitations of the original Hemline Index theory itself?
Well, we've touched on causation versus correlation already. That's a really big one. Another is what critics call its simplistic view. I mean, the Hemline Index focuses only on skirt length, ignoring countless other factors like colors, fabrics, silhouettes, the overall style mood.
It's just one single data point in a vast, complex system of style.
Exactly. It also lacks universality. The theory is primarily based on Western fashion history, mainly US and Europe, and doesn't easily account for the immense global, regional, or cultural variations in style around the world.
That's a huge limitation if you're trying to apply it broadly today.
Absolutely. And finally, economists emphasize quite rightly that the economy is influenced by a multitude of complex factors: government policies, technological advancements, global events, consumer confidence,
Mm,
which isn't solely expressed through skirts, obviously.
of course.
So relying solely on hemlines ignores all these crucial elements. The sources even list other, perhaps equally quirky indicators people look for, like the lipstick index, the skyscraper index, or the hot wait staff
The
index.
hot weight staff index, I'm definitely going to have to look that one up later.
Okay.
But speaking of other quirky indicators, our sources highlight a trend, especially online, of people spotting recession indicators everywhere in fashion right now. What are some of these others they mention?
It does seem to have become a popular pastime online, spotting these things. One of the most well-known, which our sources discuss, is the lipstick index.
Ah, yes, the theory that a spike in sales of lipstick and other affordable feel-good beauty products signals a downturn.
Yeah,
You can't afford a new car or vacation, so you buy a nice lipstick to cheer yourself up.
precisely. Though the sources do mention this didn't hold universally true in 2020, probably because of, well, mask wearing.
Right. A real-world disruption to the theory. Good
Yeah.
point. What about men's fashion? Anything there that the sources bring up?
There's the necktie style theory. Men supposedly wear more conservative ties, slimmer, less adventurous colors during depressions, perhaps to signal seriousness and, employability.
Okay.
Wider, bolder styles supposedly indicate economic recovery, kind of making a statement.
That feels like it connects back to the idea of presenting a certain image during uncertain times, projecting stability or something.
It does seem to tap into that. And perhaps the most surprising men's indicator, noted in the sources, comes from former U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Alan Greenspan.
Greenspan had a fashion theory
Yeah.
about men's underwear.
He observed the sales of men's underwear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Theory is that sales dip when men have less money or are cutting back, as it's typically one of the last things they bother to replace. Out of sight, out of mind.
Ah,
And the sources note this particular theory apparently held true in 2009 during the Great Recession and again in 2020 during the pandemic downturns.
that's incredibly specific and apparently held up in recent crises. Fascinating. Beyond individual items, are there more general fashion moods or aesthetics that people connect to the economy according to the sources?
Yes, definitely. The sources point to recent trends like quiet luxury, that very understated, high quality, logo free look, an emphasis on basics, quality over quantity, minimalist fashion generally, and more muted tones.
Like a move away from flashiness.
Exactly. One source even mentions Mocha Mousse being Pantone's color of the year for 2025, highlighting this trend towards more subdued, perhaps calmer palettes.
Interesting, like a collective desire for timelessness and maybe financial restraint. Less showing off.
Exactly. These trends might reflect that collective desire for timeless style or a general restraint in spending and conspicuous display, which some interpret as reflecting economic caution or uncertainty.
Okay, what about some of the very specific trend callouts happening online right now? The ones the sources mentioned, like peplum tops, skinny jeans, indie sleeves, skinny scarves. Are the sources presenting those as true economic indicators?
The sources are actually quite clear on this point. While these are being linked online to recession talk, the sources suggest they are often just examples of fashion cyclicality trends coming back around, or pure nostalgia.
Right.
They kind of lose their original cultural context when they're discussed in this flattened online space.
So they might just be coming back in style anyway, regardless of the economy, just their time again.
Right. The sources specifically note that peplums, for instance, actually tend to return after moments of crisis. They reference Christian Dior's iconic new look after World War II as a classic example.
Wow.
It was a return to a more structured, perhaps more formal silhouette following a period of great upheaval and scarcity, not during it.
That's a really insightful historical parallel.
Mm.
Interesting. What about that other trend one source highlights, the return of business casual to the club? What's that about?
Yes. This was apparently a notable trend in the first half of the 2010s, so immediately following the 2008 recession.
Oh,
And the reason, as that source explains it, was likely that people had less disposable income. They were less willing, or maybe less able, to invest in entirely separate wardrobes for work and for going out. They needed versatile clothes they could wear, well, everywhere.
so you bought one outfit that had to work for your 10 a.m. meeting and your 10 p.m. social plans later that night.
Precisely. That source even cites the transformation of brands like Pretty Little Thing, which apparently shifted from being purely a youthful party brand towards offering more versatile business casual adjacent styles. It was reflecting a shift in consumer demand.
Wow.
And fascinatingly, the sources note that recent runway shows have started featuring iterations of corporate garb and business casual looks again.
Really? Designers are putting office wear, or riffs on it, on the runway again.
Yes, sources mention designers like Stella McCartney, Commission, Ashlyn Park, and Simone Bilotti at Bali. Stella McCartney even explicitly titled her collection theme From Laptop to Lap Dance, directly linking workwear versatility to evening activities.
Okay, explicit link there.
Yeah. It shows how this need, or maybe desire, for multifunctional dressing is reemerging as a design theme right now.
So connecting all these threads from the sources, the historical hemline index, the lipstick and underwear indices, quiet luxury, this business casual return, where do the sources land? Are these theories reliable predictors of the economy, or are they just interesting correlations, internet chatter, or simply cyclical trends repeating?
Well, the takeaway from the sources seems pretty nuanced. It's not a simple yes or no. While some internet theories can definitely flatten historical and cultural context, some shifts in collective style do genuinely seem to indicate what's happening within the fashion industry itself, and they do reflect broader consumer habits and sentiments.
So it tells us something about how people are feeling and how they're spending their money, even if it can't reliably predict the next market crash month by month.
Exactly. One source notes that as of its writing, economic indicators are raising some red flags. It mentions a Deutsche Bank survey suggesting, I think, a 43% chance of a U.S. recession at that time. And it connects recent trends like quiet luxury and that versatile business casual return directly to past recession era consumer behaviors described in the other sources.
So while maybe not foolproof economic predictors in isolation,
They can certainly contextualize what one source calls collective sartorial anxiety, how people are thinking about how to dress, what feels appropriate, what feels safe, and crucially, what they're willing or able to spend their money on in uncertain times. It's a reflection of the consumer psyche.
that's a fantastic way to put it, collective sartorial anxiety. So to summarize this deep dive then, the hemline index is this really fascinating, though heavily debated historical theory. It highlights a potential connection between fashion and the economy that's captured imaginations for decades.
But it's not a perfect predictor, especially today, given the sheer speed and diversity of trends.
Right. But fashion is undeniably often a reflection of broader societal and economic context, even if it's complicated.
Absolutely. And exploring these connections, whether it's hemlines or lipstick sales or even what people wear to the club, offers a unique and often surprising lens through which to view the world around us. It makes you look at things differently.
It absolutely does, and it makes you think differently about those trends you just see every day scrolling online or walking down the street. So, given how complex and diverse fashion is now, our sources kind of leave us with this thought for you, the listener. If you were looking for a modern fashion indicator of the economy today, what would it be? What trend feels like a true signal of these economic times to you?